This is our daily study of Pirkei Avot, the Mishnah Ethics of the Fathers. For those who have yard site for tonight, the 25th of Tammuz, Yeshaya Babrov, Joseph Mosel, Rose Newman, Rebecca Ritz, Jenny Shanerman, and Joel Tonkin. May their memory be for a blessing. Chapter 5, Mishnah 5, and a link to the text of the Mishnah will be in the first comment below. Continuing in the patterns of tens, and this is the second to last Mishnah, then there's going to be one more after this with patterns of 10 in the Torah. And this one is actually a unit of 10 relating to Jewish history according to rabbinic tradition. Asar Nisim Nasu Lavosenu Beis Hamikdash. 10 miracles were performed for our fathers in the temple. Okay, so the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, the sacred temple on the Temple Mount. The Mishnah is going to delineate 10 miracles, and all these miracles were sort of necessary, things that you don't think about, but things that were sort of necessary for the temple to function properly. So Lohi Pila Isha Mereach Basar HaKodesh. The first one is the most random, kind of odd. No woman ever miscarried from the odor of the sacrificial flesh. We don't really hear this nowadays. You know, the Talmud sometimes speaks about how nature has changed or medicine has changed. Sometimes medical knowledge has changed. Sometimes the medical reality itself. But apparently, there used to be so much more mortality in childbirth, and people were less healthy, so perhaps that was part of it. But women would miscarry from just smelling flesh, from smelling meat. And the Gati commentary says because pregnant women have such cravings that if they smell the meat but they can't have it, it'll just shake up their body too much and they might miscarry. So interesting. So, but no woman ever miscarried from the smell of the flesh in the temple. Okay. Below hisriach basar hakodesh me'olam, and the sacrificial flesh never became putrid. So certain kinds of offerings, you can slaughter them, but then wait 2 days until you actually eat them. And they didn't have refrigerators then, so you don't stick it in the fridge. You're leaving raw meat out for up to 2 days. And apparently it was just a miracle that they didn't go bad. It didn't go bad. Okay. V'lo nira zvuv bebeis hamit b'chaim, and no fly was ever seen in the slaughterhouse. Right? Imagine if the priests are trying to slaughter the animals, and actually you didn't need to be a priest to slaughter the animal. Just like nowadays you have a shochet, a ritual slaughterer. Anyone who knows the laws is able to slaughter. The role of the priest really begins after the slaughter. He catches the blood in a sacred vessel and sprinkles it on the altar, and pours it on the altar, depending on the sacrifice. And there's a whole seder havoda. There's a whole order of service that he does with it. But the slaughtering, anyway, there was a special slaughterhouse before all that, and there were no flies. Imagine all these animals being slaughtered, and they wouldn't have been able to do their job if there were flies. Okay, v'lo era keri l'choin gadol b'yom HaKippurim, and no seminal discharge ever befell the high priest on Yom Kippur. So if the high priest had a discharge of semen, he would have been ritually impure. If it happened in the night or something, and he wasn't planning on it, but he would become ritually impure, and then he would not be able to perform the service. But that never happened. And not only that, but it would have been, Hati says, it would have been shameful and embarrassing for all the people. Why isn't the Kohen Gadol here? They always had a replacement backed up, replacement Kohen ready to go if the Kohen became defiled, but this particular defilement would have been especially embarrassing, and apparently that never happened. Okay. And then it gets, I would say more relevant to things that are actually necessary for the daily functioning of the temple. The rains never extinguished the fire of the wood pile on the altar. So think about it. The altar is right there outside. There's no roof over it. It's out in the courtyard. It's out in the open. They're slaughtering all these animals, and the idea is the fire is supposed to rise symbolically to God. The fire is always supposed to be burning. It's the sense of this internal fire. And we have a ner tamid, a perpetual fire in synagogues to commemorate the menorah on the one hand. That fire was also always burning. But the fire on the altar was also supposed to be always burning. Even through the night, they kept it burning, a sort of symbol of continuity and power. But even if it was pouring rain, it wouldn't extinguish the fire on the altar. Okay. Not only that, but another miracle, the wind never blew out the column of smoke. So the column of smoke is supposed to rise from the altar up to heaven. And sometimes the Torah speaks of it miraculously sort of shooting up to the clouds, literally, symbolically. Now, we don't really believe God lives in the sky because God doesn't have a body, but it is symbolic, powerful symbolism. And the wind never blew the smoke off its course. Um, Interestingly, Maimonides says because the wind was always calm when the smoke was going up, which is interesting. You might have thought there was even on it was a very windy day, but it's like there's a force field around the smoke column. But Maimonides says no, that it's just it wasn't windy when the smoke was happening, which is interesting. And to me, that shows Maimonides always tries to show, I think, how miracles happen in a more naturalistic way. So it's more natural for them simply to not be wind than for there to be wind and it not penetrating the smoke. So that's just my own insight of why Maimonides would clarify that way, would say that, which I found very interesting. Um, okay, what else? Elonim sapsul ba'omer uvishte halechem uvelechem apanim. This counts as one of the 10 miracles, but a three-part one. There was never found a disqualifying defect in the Omer offering or the 2 loaves on Shavuos or the showbread. Okay, so we have to clarify this. We nowadays we count the Omer. Ever wonder what the Omer means? In temple times, it was an offering of barley that you would give on the second day of Pesach, and they only would cut a minimal amount of barley the day before. You're only supposed to cut a minimum amount and say this is going to be the offering. But if a defect was found in it and it has to be given at a particular time, it has to be given on the second day of Pesach, you simply can't redo it because that's the thing you cut, and you wouldn't be able to redo it. So it really takes a miracle. Thank God it never was, no ritual defect was ever found in it. Okay, and they were always able to bring the Omer. And if you couldn't bring the Omer, you couldn't eat the new grain. It's when you bring the Omer, when you give God his new grain, that allows you to have the new grain that's growing in the spring around Pesach time. And you wouldn't be able to eat from the new crop. You'd have to hope you have enough saved from the old crop, but luckily it never came up. Or the 2 loaves. It's interesting that on Pesach you can't have chametz, you can't have leaven, but then you count 7 weeks to Shavuos, and the main ritual involves taking these 2 loaves of bread as part of a wave service. The priest would elevate them. Okay, so these 2 loaves of bread made of wheat, because Shavuos is always around the time of the wheat harvest. Pesach is the barley harvest. Barley is secondary, but wheat is the main staple of our diet, right? Well, of any diet, wheat bread to break bread, so to speak. So you'd elevate these 2 loaves, and no defect was ever found in those either. And that's important too, because it had to be baked already before the holiday. You weren't allowed to bake it on Shavuos. And so what's done is done. And if you found a defect in it, you just can't offer them, and then it's ruined. Not only that, but you would need the 2 loaves offering in order to be able to then bring any meal offerings of wheat to God. So it would have ruined the whole system basically, and thank God no defect was found. Or the showbread, there are these 12 loaves of bread, and these bread, so-called breads, were actually matzah. They were actually unleavened, although matzah was soft back then, but that's a different discussion. 12 loaves of bread on the shulchan, on the table, in perpetual display before God, and you'd bake them on Friday and place them on Shabbos. But if a defect was found, the table would be empty, and there's no showbread there. Um, and that would have just been, and the temple's not operating properly, and thank God no defect was found. Okay, the next few miracles, Omdim tzfufim umishtachavim revachim. The people stood tightly pressed together, yet prostrated themselves at ease. So these are the 3 pilgrimage festivals when every able-bodied male is supposed to go to Jerusalem in the temple: Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Now you have all these men gathered in the Temple Mount, it's a small space, packed in like sardines, and at certain points in the service, they have to bow down on their knees the way that Muslims do, right? But we still do that in the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. But all right, they used to do that more often. You have to bow on your knees all the way down. So if you're packed in so tight, how do you have room to do that? Mishnah says it was simply a miracle. There was just room, and it doesn't make sense. So that's quite a miracle. V'lo hizik nachash v'akrav b'Yerushalayim me'olam. And no snake or scorpion ever injured anyone in Jerusalem. Right? There's all these people converging on Jerusalem, all Jews from all over the world, and they were never bitten by a snake and scorpion. And Meiri clarifies that even though there were a lot of snakes and scorpions in Jerusalem, that's why it's a miracle. They just wouldn't bite the people. Okay, velo hizik nachash v'akrav b'Yerushalayim me'olam, velo amar adam, and finally the 10th and last one, velo amar adam l'chavero tzarli hamakom sha'alon b'Yerushalayim. No man ever said to his fellow, the space is too narrow for me to lodge overnight in Jerusalem. Which is a way of saying there was always enough space. How was there enough hotel room? Now we know if there's a convention, I go to the APAC convention in DC and you have to book your room. That's the capital of America, like Jerusalem's the capital of Israel. You have to book your room weeks in advance, or else there'll be no rooms, no hotels, there's no room in this gigantic city. So if the three pilgrimage festivals, everyone's supposed to go to Jerusalem, how was there room? And the answer is just it was just a miracle. People found room, and that raises the question. When we say miracle, is it literally supernatural, or is it more just like they made it they made it work, and that was miraculous? It depends on which of these 10 miracles you analyze. You know how supernatural versus more naturalistic miracle, but they all do seem to be speaking to supernatural miracles, some of which are totally impossible without God's intervention. Okay, so we can say the Malay. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamiromim Hamitzei Menuchanachon Al Kanfei Hashechina Bimalos Kedoshim Etorim Kizar Harakia Mazhirim Es Nishmos Kalas Karos Shel Halayla Shel Chuli Olamam Ba'avur Shemispalim Bad Haskaras Nishmasam Began Eden Tehem Menuchasam Lachein Balarachmim Yastireim B'Seser Kinafav Liolamim Yitzor B'Tzorachayim Es Nishmasam Adonai Nachlasam Yanuchu B'Shalom Mishvasam Benomar Amen. And in English, O God full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence in the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine like the glow of the firmament for the souls of Yeshaya Babrov, Joseph Mosel, Rose Newman, Rebecca Ritz, Jenny Shanerman, and Joel Tonkin, in whose memory we study and pray. May their resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the Master of Mercy shelter them in the shelter of his wings for eternity. May he bind their soul in the bond of life. Hashem is their heritage. May they rest in peace. And let us say Amen.